Hello and welcome to The Possibility of Spirit and the Spirit of Possibility, a conversation with Cory Endrulat on the Aquarian Renaissance Indigenous Revival Summit. I'm your host, Keegan Anatole, and I'm so excited to be welcoming Cory here today. I've been following his content on YouTube and other platforms for a few years now. Very interesting stuff, very inspiring for me personally. So, welcome, Cory.
Thank you, Keegan. And your work is awesome as well. Thank you for setting up this whole summit with all the fantastic speakers. And I was just amazed. I was like, oh my gosh, I don't know a lot of these folks and some of the topics that they're talking about. So it's always fascinating to see. And I'm sure many of their followers, if they're watching this, they're unfamiliar perhaps with my work. So this is always great to bridge new avenues and to find perhaps the possibility of new knowledge, as you just insinuated the possibility of spirit. And the spirit of possibility, what that insinuates is a connection between possibility and spirit. So we can get into that and talk about all the different projects I'm doing locally, all the action steps, the books and movie projects and community projects, growing food together, setting up all sorts of local events, bringing businesses together. This is how we create a new system moving into the future, like you say, a conscious awakening.
The core intention for this whole summit is to gather a luminous spectrum of perspectives that help us transcend both evil and victimhood, showing us the way to a world of mutual reverence and regenerative relationships. So that's kind of my guiding mantra, if you will, here in prayer as we're exploring these speakers and their wonderful work in the world. And so, yeah, I'm just going to share also some background information about Cory for those who are not familiar with him. And so I'll read through his bio. Researching since the age of 13 and investigating food products in the grocery store, Cory Endrulat is an abolitionist, a prolific author, a fellow human being, and truth seeker who cares deeply for the world, willing to confront the world's most difficult topics. He is an integrative nutrition health coach, a newspaper editor, an online summit host, a researcher, and a content creator. He specializes on topics concerning permaculture, health, education, freedom, nature-based philosophy, and local community activism. His focus is to inspire and empower the generations to come in the face of uncertainty with the search of past and even present wisdom throughout all cultures and beliefs. So you are truly a young modern philosopher, and I really respect that about you, and I look forward to your droplets of wisdom that you have to share with us today. So, uh,
Thank you. Well, we all are philosophers, and that's the beautiful thing of it, is can we find the possibility, I'm going to use that word a lot, of seeing the philosopher within ourselves, seeing the teacher within ourselves, seeing the governor within ourselves, seeing the healer within ourselves, right? Rather than perhaps being dependent on those being external forces and merely like, oh, I'm powerless and I can't do that myself. Seeing the power within ourselves, especially having information at our fingertips nowadays. It should be even easier to do those things, not harder. So I can use that as the pretext for this conversation because when we're talking about spirit and we're talking about conscious elevation, the first reaction of many people may be, wait, what? What are you talking about? Spirit? That's not scientific. Or no, what are you talking about? Does it exist? Is it real? Right? So possibility comes to be a natural conversation here. Now, when you're thinking about freedom, which is one of the main topics I also talk about on my channel, it is infinite possibility. So there's no coincidence that when we're looking at freeing the mind from restraints of attaining certain knowledge or utilizing certain knowledge, when we're talking about religion or spirituality in the sense of freeing the mind, getting beyond the mind, or freeing oneself from man-made systems into more natural or God or innate systems, we're talking about the same thing here: freedom, spirit, and possibility. There's a relationship between these three, which within themselves can prove a lot to our world psychologically, right? And what is the word psyche? Soul. Okay, well, where is the soul, right? So people get into these questions and they go into these deep conversations. Navigating it, even with words, can be difficult if you consider the possibility of something beyond word or something beyond thing or something beyond even scientific study. But it doesn't mean it doesn't express. It doesn't mean it's not there. And so this idea of spirit, this idea of possibility, something that I want people to kind of realize. It's like, what if these are one and the same in many ways? Just as presence is something that is here and now and something that we can utilize, something that we can embrace. But if we're always wrapped in our own head or in the future and the past, we don't see this clear and obvious reality right in front of us. We may say there's truths right in front of us, but they're being concealed by darkness or lies or different things. So then it's not a matter of learning something new, right? Or studying something new necessarily, but even uncovering all the things that are just blocking that truth and blocking that light. So it's more of an unschooling and unlearning than it is having to teach anything. So there's different ways to go about the world. And I just want people to conceive of that possibility.
Mm. When when we get into contemplating these words and these concepts, I really like to look for guidance in parse and
Mm,
kind of breaking them down. And I notice like possibility is the same root as like position or
mm,
your posse, right? It's it ha-
yes.
it has various meanings, but they relate. Um,
Hmm.
and
Spirit, right? Means breath, inspiration, respiration. But again, what about the possibility of maybe these are not the roots of those words? That's fine too. But what I'm saying is that this very possibility is the thing that gets restricted often by religion and by science when they've said we've figured it out. And this conversation on trying to prove something or trying to convert somebody is something to be wary of. Because there's always the possibility of, well, wait, if God is omnipotent, omnipresent, all-knowing, how come there's all this division? How come there's misinterpretation? How come there's different translations? Wouldn't he know that? Simple questions like that. Or even, is there a truth beyond word? What helps people understand something more beyond word? Well, it's emotion, it's feeling. Okay, well, wouldn't God speak through the most important way, the most like touching, deep way, not just through word, right? So people look at the Bible, they're looking at certain scriptures, and then they debate and they say, oh, well, my God is the best and this one isn't. So it's all about seeing, okay, the possibility of, well, whoa, what about this other religion I've never studied before? What about this different worldview I've never studied before? Oh, well, my religion says I'm not supposed to study that. Oh, my science says that's unscientific. I shouldn't study that. Right? Like I'm putting out a video about cranial sacral therapy. Oh, that's unscientific. But what about all the people that says it's helping them? Right? So can you deny the experience of somebody? And what about the fact that it's an intuitive practice of listening to somebody's body, being in touch with your emotions? Not so much, oh, what are the numbers? Oh, I got to give a drug for this and I got to study the specific anatomy. No, it's about feeling, listening to the body. How are you supposed to prove that? Right? So things like this, could really open up a whole world for people when they start talking to natural practitioners, when they start talking to permaculturalists and not just farmers, when they start talking to people who were law enforcement, who've been doing it 30, 40 years and they escaped the system, or veterans who have trauma coming back from war. War isn't such a great thing anymore. Traditional medicine isn't such a great thing anymore. Traditional law and government isn't such a great thing anymore because you're hearing from people and you're sitting down present to hear the possibility of something that may disagree with you, that may make you feel uncomfortable. But yet, by embracing it, by understanding it, you find yourself closer to something that is more fulfilling than anything that the man-made world can give you, which you can call spirit.
mm, I'm sticking on what you said about permaculturists, not just farmers. And I was thinking, this is a brand new thought for me. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
permaculturalists are just farmers, meaning they are farmers who are doing justice
Mm,
by honoring all the different like natural beings and working in partnership with them. So do
yes.
you want to speak about your experience with that and share kind of
Mm.
some of the on the ground projects that you're doing at the moment?
Yeah, it's a relationship, right? When we see that our lives are a relationship, this is another conception of perspective or seeing opposites or different positions, right? You say position is just the art and book of opposites. There's the word position again, right?
Right, can you go back 30 seconds because I got a connection problem.
Oh, good. So I was saying that my book, The Arts of Books of Opposites, has the word position in it, right? Which you said is similar to possibility, right? So there's a position there that I'm challenging. I'm looking at another worldview, and it's a relationship, seeing how these different opposing worldviews can exist in the same reality. Well, how are humans and nature to work together? How are they and their food supposed to be integrated, right? How are they and the animals supposed to be integrated? And then the animals with the food. And so if you can create a whole ecosystem conscious of all these different elements, I would say that's permaculture, right? Which is creating a permanent culture, something that lasts, something that is sustained, something that helps heal the earth and not just destroy it. And so it's really a respect to it. It's a love. And we can do this with all the relationships in our life, right? The relationships we have to systems, the relationships we have to our friends, family, neighbor. Do we consider that relationships, or do we only consider certain things relationship? Because we all are bound to each other. So, as much as I want to say, hey, you own yourself, you have self-ownership, there's also the opposite to that, which is, wait, what if we're all part of this collective whole, right? You did a video for the Liberate 2 showcase where you talked about this idea of we are all one. Well, can that be true simultaneous with the fact that you own yourself, right? If I asked you, like, do you own yourself? You'd probably say, yeah. So, how could both of these things be true? Well, again, it's looking at possibility to see the bigger picture. When you see the bigger picture and you can conceive of all the different worldviews, wait, you see everything. You're almost like God yourself, huh? And we say we're made in the image of God. It's almost as if we are invoking the spirit within ourselves. But yes, when it comes to permaculture, when we have that respect, it is no coincidence these folks tend to be spiritual. Or you go into truth movements and these folks tend to be spiritual. Permaculture has been something that, really resonated with me because I'm a nature-seeking individual. And I met someone, Jim Gale, down here in Florida when I moved down, who was growing food forest. And I was like, what's a food forest? And so he, gave me a tour through his food forest, and it was very inspiring. I'm like, wait, this is totally different. This is not gardening. This is not normal farming. And I was seeing how people's perceptions were being opened merely by taking that tour, right? By giving them a new experience, something that they never conceived before. And this, happens many times in life, again, with all the different people I meet and different things I experience. There's natural farming that goes back in Japan where they were competing with big farmers and they were producing more yield than them without using any chemicals or anything that, these big farms were doing. So, there's a lady who lives off grid who uses just hay and she just throws hay in the ground, uses that for her compost and never went to the grocery store again. There's methods out there for growing food that are sometimes even simpler than the more complex versions that can still be radically beneficial. Um, so when you study down this worldview, I was just like, wow, we got to create a local community center here in Tampa because that center, Jim Gale's place, was in St. Cloud, which is around Orlando. So I'm like, wow, we got to get something around here in Tampa. So that's when I started doing events monthly and I shared it with them and I brought different speakers. We did events on all sorts of things and we inspired people to learn about this stuff. And they're like, wait, this is the solution. So then some of them wanted to invest into it. So I'm like, okay, let's try to buy land. Well, land goes for millions of dollars around here. So I'm like, all right, let's find someone who also owns land. And that's what happened. I met Ryan RPG Golembeski, who is a world-renowned Bigfoot researcher. He's been in the Travel Channel, Discovery Channel, all the big networks for the researching Bigfoot, and he goes to conferences all over the world. The guy is prominently known for this field of study. And like I couldn't have found a better person to partner with on this project because he's a content creator. He is so open-minded. He's willing to talk about anything. He wants to create a place for his kids and other kids and to demonstrate to the whole community what permaculture is, and then of course the other idea talk about voluntarism, which is that we can live in a voluntary free world based on consent, right? Which is, a very good precept as opposed to what we have now, which everything is based on force or violence. And people are feeling that in their lives as there's constant war and conflict and fear-mongering news. And people are like, we don't need that anymore. We need to return back to nature. We need to start growing our own food. We need to be self-sustainable. So we're going to show people how to do that. We're already doing that, right? We already have several different videos. We already have parents bringing their kids. It's already becoming a school. It's a beautiful thing just to see, and I think everybody can create this in their local community. So it's called Bigfoot Food Forest because of the Bigfoot theme, and we'll share all sorts of ideas. But it's also a big footprint on the map and toward changing the world.
That's beautiful. I love that. I'm a fan of Bigfoot, Sasquatch myself also. Yeah, that's another topic we could definitely get into. But I wanted to speak first about yield. You mentioned the word
Mm,
yield, and that that's one of the principles of permaculture to obtain a yield, and it's actually a self fulfilling dynamic. My favorite street sign is the yield.
mm,
When we yield to the wisdom of nature and go with the Tao and go with the flow and respect her law, then we end up in the chalice of abundance, right? And
hmm
ye old wisdom of Mother Nature guiding our actions instead of the static, like every creation in human society starts as an idea, right?
mm,
And we're stuck in some static ideas, which is static is a lot like the word state. And I think
mm,
that the state that we create is is a product of this mental block that we have, many of us have, of thinking that it's fixed, that there's a certain way, like this is, and it's so kind of ludicrous when you think about it, like this concept that this is the norm and that's just
mm,
something that stays that way. Like I can't even say it because I know that everything is constantly changing.
mm.
And it's the spirit of possibility when you say that and highlight it, it's like it's just simply being open to
Yep.
that change, to be on the learning journey instead of just thinking, oh, we already know it all.
Yes.
It's like, how could we possibly? There's so much mystery and discovery to be made every day. Uh,
Yes.
yeah, I love
That
your.
very openness, that very possibility is the very spirit that the people question, and they say, like I said, a lot of people who are call themselves atheists or attached to these titles can deny from entering their own life and seeing this possibility of, different experiences. Oh, an angel talked to me or God talked to me, and then they're looking at them like, wait, what? Like, how is that possible, right? And as somebody who loves medicine, this becomes even more apparent when you realize, wait, people can heal themselves when they have a relationship with nature or God, that is perhaps more profound than somebody who just says, no, I got to just rely on this material thing. There is a level of this nocebo effect or believing in the effect that can have an effect within itself. Um, and now there's people like Bruce Lipton and Joe Dispenza, and there's a bunch of people doing science about, intention and consciousness. Though again, some of that is also going to be labeled as pseudoscience or something not worth looking into. So, can you conceive of the possibility that what they are saying is true? And, can you conceive of the possibility of you even engaging in that truth and seeing for yourself, right? Rather than just outright saying, oh, well, there's no literature for that, or there's nothing that supports what I envision the science must look like. Because if you go in with that frame of mind, what about the different ways that we've studied science throughout history? What about the indigenous tribes? You have many speakers talking about that, right? Their methods are not necessarily the same as the methods we're using now, and their lifestyles were radically different as well. If they're living close to nature, do you think their mentality, their perception will be very different as well? Yeah, from what it is now, because we're not living very close to nature, at least as much as perhaps the indigenous people. So these are all things to consider. And yeah, I agree, with a lot of what you were saying. Thank you for making those points. because we're raised into this system at a very young age, and we don't see a lot of the programming that takes place. We don't see a lot of the things that we are taught, and we really study them for ourselves, and we say, I want to learn this. And so, being open to the possibility of new information is something that we have to do if we want to evolve as a person, not just as a society. And of course, the society is reflective of the individual. So the individual has to do this, and then they start sharing that on a mass scale using technology as this tool that can spread information so rapidly, like what you're creating with the summit. And then boom, you see a massive transformation, right? The school systems transform, all the systems transform merely by introducing a different idea. You mentioned statics, and it reminds me of a book called Social Statics by Herbert Spencer. Herbert Spencer was a really famous like psychologist and polymath in the 1800s who wrote about all sorts of things. And if you read that book, he talks about this idea of voluntary interaction as being so important for the future of mankind, and that he establishes certain natural laws about human behavior, talking about this idea of equal reciprocity, that we're all kind of connected to each other, in that sense that we have the golden rule, in the sense that we're all bound to the same principles. Mark Passio calls it natural law, but there's been so many people through history talking about this. And this is something that's not a physical law. It's considered a spiritual law. It's considered a moral law. Oh, now we're talking about morality. Oh, shoot. All of a sudden, now that's being pulled into the realm of spirituality again. Well, what's going on? If I'm conscious, if I'm open, and if I'm listening to my environment, I know how to respond. This is the greatest moral act I can take, right? Like Osho would define morality as merely being conscious of your environment, not getting so stuck on a select definition, but being conscious of what is going on. So, um, if we're looking at this in the lens of what I talked about with the spirit of possibility and the possibility of spirit, if you're opening your mind to see new ideas and possibilities and say, well, wait, what if this hurts somebody? Wait, what if this does this? Well, what if it's going to down the road cause this problem? And I don't see it right now, but it's going to happen later. Like, unless we ask that question, we're just going to act impulsively or we're going to act irresponsibly. Right. So, and what's great now is you have like AI, which can predict these things, and now, have like a whole database where it'll tell you all the possibilities and all the different opposites. And I use that in my book, the Arts and Book of Opposites. But you can only use AI as well, only so much, because it's a product of nature. So if you want to go back to the roots and you want to see the big picture, it's about, again, the opposite of nature. You can say it's technology, but the opposite of technology is nature. And really, is there a distinction here, right? Because what if these things can benefit each other? What if they can be integrated into the same environment, right? Using permaculture, right? Using just our conscious awareness and applying it to these things so they don't control us, we control them. And we don't even have to control it in a sense if we're able to flow, like you mentioned. Maybe there's less need to figure out what to do and put things in neat little boxes than there is to merely let go and see as the path unveils for us what action to take. Because usually there's signs given to us by this universe as to what we should do. With our body, if we are having a certain disease, there's certain symptoms, there's certain things that pop up. That's an amazing wisdom. That's an amazing innate natural intelligence that we are to respect. So while everybody's talking about artificial intelligence, we have it within us. And again, we create artificial intelligence. So there is definitely something amazing that needs to be respected.
Absolutely. And then the main concept that comes up for me when you speak about this being open and feeling the environment is is empathy, right?
Yep.
It's our ability to like to to reach out with our amazing feeling capacity, which is another aspect of our intelligence, right? We
Yep.
have this mental intelligence that gives us a lot of capabilities. But
Hmm.
there's a whole another level of capabilities that we are cutting ourselves off from by denying the senses or giving them less importance than they actually have, right? It's
Yes.
another way for us to process information, for us to use our intuition to feel and and also to consider to empathize using the imagination of what
Hmm.
could happen down down the spiral of time for our future
Yes.
generations. We have to ask ourselves, what is my action here right now today going to mean for my children's children's children, and then
Mhm.
and then move forward from that information based on our
Yes.
imaginative capacity. Yeah.
Yes. It's sensitivity, absolutely. Being able to say, hey, I have this feeling and I'm not going to numb it out. I'm not going to distract it with technology. I'm not going to, become consumed in this whole artificial world and start not paying attention to everything outside there, or get trapped in that material world where I can't feel anything now that seems to be a bit more spiritual, right? It's like, oh, I don't know why I can't feel this. It's like, have you gone barefoot in nature? Have you done grounding? Have you connected with the indigenous people? Have you talked to, like I've talked to an archaeologist, who created a food forest for over 20 years. You go to that food forest, it's like, oh my gosh, right? So, like, have you gone to those environments? Because when you're in the environment, then you're more likely to see these things as well, right? Right? If you're raised as a kid in a certain environment, you're more likely to have certain traits. So, there is, like I said, expression, there's science to be seen here, but it can be difficult, especially in a world that may not want you to see that science, that may suppress it, actively censor it. You look up, like I said, craniosacral therapy, and you get a bunch of people attacking it, but yet undeniably, why are they attacking it? Because it's so popular. Because people are saying, wait, this is an alternative, and it's a gentle alternative to perhaps something more extreme. Even massage, it's an alternative to massage. It could be even way simpler than that. So, the possibility of something like a really gentle touch healing somebody, or a new world view that actually can, align to science. I like looking at Eastern philosophy. The possibility that New Age coming in maybe deteriorates and distorts some of that information. The possibility that there's always different ways to interpret everything. Yes, I mean, this is a beautiful thing, though, because when you see this, you don't attach to any one thing and you're disciplining your mind. The more you're able to entertain thoughts that you disagree with, the more you're able to discern for yourself your own worldview. And then you become your own individual person. And then, now you have, like you said, you respect me for my philosophy. All I'm doing is just observing upon the world as myself, right? Like looking upon this whole crazy world and sitting back and taking notes and reflecting and meditating and being present. Like these are the things that I can do um, if I'm looking at the bigger picture. If I'm trying to not so much say, okay, this is already true, I'm going to move on with that. It's like, no, let's go back to the basics again. Everything I know is wrong. And then what's the possibility that maybe this is wrong and could be totally different, right? So that's why I wrote my book on opposites. It challenges even myself. And it would say that you should not even agree with me. It would say that you should not even read this book because at a high level, you would understand that this is just a material thing, or that you are among me, and that you should not depend upon me for your knowledge, for your wisdom, because you have it. If I'm sharing something that is universal and eternal all around us, it's not something that depends upon me. This is why people left the churches, the mainstream churches. They're like, I don't want a middleman between me and God, right? I don't want some religion that has all these doctrines and rituals necessarily. Maybe I can practice it on my own or find my own way that makes me more connected to source. Oh, you're a pagan. Oh, now you're this or you're that, right? Throw these attack terms, but undeniably, people are doing this because they see something is wrong and something is perhaps a bit more open than what these systems are trying to do, which is, closing these terms and saying we've got it figured out. I mean, Socrates said in philosophy, the only thing he knows is nothing, right? So this is considered like the father of philosophy. It doesn't mean he knows nothing, right? But from that position of humility, you actually start to learn more. So this is an irony that we have to play into in our daily life. Well, okay, perhaps to connect with God, I need to not have God. It's like, wait, what? What's going on? Or that perhaps to have science, I need to escape science. Like, what? How is that possible? Right? Ask yourself those questions. If you're in any field of your own, how can you escape your own field? Because in that way, let's say you're a natural medicine practitioner, you can connect to the very same people that need your help the most, which is the traditional practitioner who's just, prescribing drugs all day and treating patients like a number line. Like you probably want to help that person, I'm sure, but you don't know how. So you have to escape your own worldview in order to do it, just as much as they have to. You need to come together, escaping your own minds and reaching out to each other with your hearts, right?
Oh, absolutely. I love what you said about being able to entertain things that we disagree with. And I would say that that is describing my whole mission going forward and what I want to help people to do, cultivate curiosity. And I think, the word cure is right in there. It's
Mm,
curiosity. And if we can take that time to delve into others' perspectives, actually we're seeing our world reflected back to us from another angle, right? And
mm,
every day is a brand new day. There's always a new perspective to explore, and that when we connect with that spirit of the explorer, of the curious adventurer, of the joy of learning, and that's what this life is all about, actually. And when we connect with that and we live it, it keeps us healthier, it keeps us
yes.
in alignment, it
Yep.
puts us on the right path so that we with everything unfolds in a way that's graceful and blissful. And
Yeah.
before we get too far beyond the concept of artificial intelligence
Mm.
and natural intelligence, you actually have another book about that. Do you want to mention about that book?
Yeah. You're talking about the one that goes into permaculture, this one, The Technology of Peace? Yes.
Hmm.
Yeah, so this goes into how permaculture can be used on a mass scale, using, influencers and people, no matter where you come from, whether you're a church or politician or, you know, any position you have in society, how you can transform your lawn into a thriving food forest and really just getting people inspired to do it. Because this is not an instruction manual of how exactly do you do it, but it's about becoming inspired to do it in the very first place. In fact, there's a whole chapter dedicated here, one of the last chapters, and it's the longest chapter called Spirit, right? So it talks about this very thing that we're talking about. But, in order for somebody to actually get into this, like I could give them all the details, I could talk about how much food they'll produce. They have to be inspired to do it in the very first place. Otherwise, they're not going to care. They're not going to want to look into the at all. You can have all the information. You can come up to them with a whole stack of papers, be like, "You've been lied to. Here's everything that you need to learn." It's like, so what? And they have to be inspired. And I get it. People are going into the grind, like you said, right? Like they're doing what they're trained to do or what they've been doing, what's comfortable, or there's things that they have to do every day, and they may not have something that keeps them alive. Something like you said, it keeps them healthy to have this sense of imagination or purpose, or have something new to study from. Like this keeps life very fresh and alive. And when you're with nature, I think that's very apparent. If you're growing a plant and you're observing its patterns and you're observing how the seasons interact and the animals interact, and then you're observing how other plants interact with each other and then how to get the right yield, like you're learning so many things just by interacting with a mere plant, right? It's like, oh, how much could you learn from a tree? The whole world, basically, if you are open to it, right? Oh, well, it's just a tree. It's like, no, it's not just a tree. It's like, have you studied the network of a tree? Have you looked at the bark and how it relates to our fingerprint, just looking at the lines? Like we are nature, right? We're not separate from it. So if we study nature, we study this out external world, yes, absolutely, we can learn from ourselves. We can learn from God or truth. And I'll have many Christians and people in religion say, oh, well, the truth is in the Bible, it's not in nature. Well, isn't nature a reflection? Aren't we a reflection of the Creator? Isn't the Creator creating all this for our benefit? So clearly it's here for a reason. Clearly we can learn from it. And this natural intelligence is basically just another word for God or for spirit or for truth. And there's many ways to say this grand design that's within nature. But that's what this intelligence refers to. It's something that was here beyond and before, and what gives way to artificial intelligence. But artificial intelligence depends upon it, actually. So if we want to evolve artificial intelligence, we actually have to evolve our natural intelligence. Because otherwise, it's going to take over us, the artificial intelligence, as many people presume. And it's going to, like I said, unconsciously control us in ways that we don't see because we're not present enough to see how it developed or what it's doing to us. So there has to be an intuitive sense, there has to be a spiritual sense developed. And as technology and man-made materialism and all this bombardment of information becomes more apparent, God is actually going to become more apparent simultaneously because it's the opposite coming into reconciliation. So you're going to see that. You're going to see a lot of people saying, well, how do we escape this technocracy? Well, it's now I found God. Like, where did this come from? Right? It's because, like, what's the one thing that's going to help them reconnect to nature more than anything else? Carl Jung said that's the strongest bulwark against the state. It's this concept of God, right? And, Jordan Peterson is getting into it too, studying Carl Jung. Many people are saying, oh, well, Jordan Peterson doesn't call himself a Christian or an atheist, and that's a big controversy, right? But again, he's trying to understand his own path. And I actually defended him. I'm like, what's wrong with trying to figure out, these different things and not attaching to a worldview? Everybody expects him to just say, oh, I'm this, I'm that, make it easy for them. Well, what if it's not so easy? You know? Right? I mean, it's not easy to prove something that doesn't have a physical existence, right? With science, this is why people have been debating about it for thousands of years. But maybe it's so easy that it goes overlooked. Or maybe it's so difficult that, it's something that requires more study, more practice, and being able to escape our current systems, right?
I think it's somewhere in scripture that is somebody asked what is the divine. Obviously I'm paraphrasing, but the answer is a movement and a rest. And
Mm,
that's, going back to in the beginning there was the word, or you could exchange that with in the beginning there was sound. And now we have cymatics. You can see the geometry of sound and how sound becomes form.
hmm
And we're creating, and like basically our physical experience is an outgrowth, right? It's a result of the templating that's happening at the level of sonic resonance.
Yeah.
And uh, you know, that's so apparent now. If you are curious enough to investigate and just check that out, you can
Yeah.
see, and the snowflakes, right, and everything, all these patterns we can see.
hmm
Um,
That tiny little flake has so much like structure within it. Right? I mean, you look at something under a microscope, you're like, whoa, this is a whole nother world. But before the invention of the microscope, it's like, wait, we had some of this understanding of how the universe worked without a microscope. How was that possible? Right?
mm,
But then also, it's like the
oh,
person that invented the microscope has to prove to everybody else, hey, this exists, this invisible molecule exists, and they're looking at him like, what are you talking about? Until you have
yeah.
to actually show them the microscope, they think you're crazy.
Well, and I was thinking of for example, Rudolf Steiner, like
Mm,
somebody who's in the area of regenerative agriculture, the creator of biodynamics.
yes.
He has this interesting book. It's called How to Know Higher Worlds. That's
Mm,
like a translation, rough translation from German. But he describes this process of observing the growing of a plant, for example. It could be something that's expressing the life principle and
mm,
just relaxing and opening your senses up to observe that. And then on the flip sides, observing the process of death and decay and seeing these transformative actions that happen and being with them as a way to open yourself up to perceive at a greater level. And he was a scientist, right? But he was a scientist using other faculties of perception that were widened, and he was cultivating that ability to widen his perspective. And we all have that within us. We can all
yes.
observe in more minute ways and
Mm.
make discoveries. And
Yeah.
he was a great example of that.
Tesla, Nikola Tesla, another example people often refer to, of saying this quote of everything is frequency, vibration, energy, and being able to conceive that again, like you said, as a scientist, well, why? And then, seeing all the crazy discoveries that he made and people took his work and people are still trying to find out his work. He definitely had a different perspective on reality or an opposite perspective to what we may be assuming is reality. So, this, you can conceive and say, oh, well, that is really hard to attain and we don't understand it, so we're going to call it spiritual and we're going to call it uh, myth and fantasy, and we're going to call it pseudoscientific just because we don't understand it. But there's a reason why it's there. There is something to learn from it. There's something to learn from everything if it's there, right? So that's the position I take. Again, is humility, possibility to even conceive it. Nonetheless, that is how we actually get it. And that's the point of what I'm trying to get at. Is, we want to try to understand God or spirit or source. Well, we have to open ourselves up to it. We have to learn beyond the words I'm saying. We have to see the spaces that differentiate these words, the spaces between our breaths, the spaces between our eyebrows and our eyes, the things that we may overlook or don't see, or the thing that is between all that we do see. And so that does take reflection, meditation, or prayer, and there's a reason why those methods are used throughout history. You look at Steiner or Manly P. Hall or any of the great researchers of the past, Alan Watts and Aldous Huxley, and you just go back, Terence McKenna, they're all sharing this perspective. Again, you don't group them into one category and say they're Christian, they're Taoist, or this and that. They're not any of those things, right? They're studying from reality and attaining their own worldview, which is a beautiful thing, which is why it can often get humorous and and tend to get very intriguing for people when they first come upon it. And, if not, somebody just denies it outright because there's something definitely there. There's a reason, again, why they're getting millions of views now. And their stuff is going viral, even though they're long, gone, we say, in this world. No, they're not gone. Their spirit still remains because they tapped into it. They're here, right? This is the presence that they tapped into.
That's fascinating, and someone might raise the point like, okay, so there's all this speculation. You can learn so much and like have so much wisdom, but what's the point? Like, where are you putting it into practical action in your life? And I want to go back to like you were saying, God as the as the opposing like power, right,
Yep.
against the state, and as nature as the answer, right? You have the movement
Mm.
that goes along with your book of natural intelligence, and
Mm.
going back to that, that quote from scripture that the divine is a movement and a rest, which is music is described as a movement, and music moves the movement, and we are
Mm.
expressing our sounds, and we're moving forward into purpose of living this connected lifestyle. Um, so that's just want to share that.
Yeah, no, you just hit it on the nail. One opposite right there is, what do I do at the same time as I still have to be doing something right now? Right? It's like, or I have all this information, but then what do I act on? Like, some of this we can get a little like, okay, well, this seems like too much, or this seems like too much information, or too much perspective. How am I supposed to take this in? This is where the concept of flow comes in. The Taoist, worldview would talk about this idea of cold cognition and hot cognition, the automatic versus the rational, right? And so there is a balance here to be achieved they call wu wei, right? Which is this spontaneous action, which is basically like an effortless action. Doesn't mean that it's basically lazy, you're not doing anything. It's about, again, listening, responding consciously, knowing of these different elements. It comes upon people naturally when they attain this information through even neuro-linguistic programming, that when somebody has the knowledge, they're more likely to act on it. They're going to take it. If people knew how to grow food and people understood all the different benefits of it, they'd already be doing it. But because they're not taught about it at a young age, it's much harder for them to grasp, nonetheless, act upon. So it's the same thing with a lot of these other things. If there is truth within it, share it. Don't expect everybody to do it. If it is the truth, over time, people will start to do it. And it's like a seed that gets planted, right? If it's in the right environment, it's going to flourish. It's going to come to life. You have to give it time. You have to be patient. And that environment needs to be open. It needs to be accepting. And so we can do that as messengers when we're sharing any message that conflicts with other people, but even ourselves. Are we open to that possibility of being wrong and that possibility of inviting other people into our life? Because again, that's how we're going to learn from not just them, but ourselves. Like when a practitioner is healing somebody, they're not just learning from the person in their body, they're learning about themselves in their own body, despite the fact they're two separate bodies, right? So this is the magic of mirroring, what they call it in integrative nutrition, and it happens all the time. It's almost like you can't escape it. It's like what you are coming upon in your day-to-day life is a reflection of what you are attracting. Some people call this the law of attraction or manifestation. You're literally pulling to yourself the very things that you conceive of in your world. So when you open up that conception to possibility and you say, I want a new reality, and you really set that intention for yourself, you're gonna get it. Which is why prayer and meditation, again, there usually is some sense of intention there. Not that there necessarily should be, because sometimes meditation is about, clearing the mind and getting out of that and then ironically finding it. But many people pray and they say, I want this, or I'm hoping for this. And there's something deep down inside, or when they meditate, things come up and it comes to the surface and they observe it and they study it, but they don't become attached to it and they let it flow. It's all about just being conscious because it will happen naturally. I know there's a level of trust in this, right? But if we don't trust the universe, we don't trust each other, how are we ever going to live in order and peace and harmony? We're always going to be conflicted within our own mind and within the world because there's always a level of fear involved. And I'm not saying that we should just um, necessarily ignore all the problems of the world. What I'm saying is to trust the path, trust the process, because there's a reason why these so-called bad things are here. There's a reason why all these so-called good things are here. But this distinction becomes, in a way, transcended when you're merely with the natural or the things that are intended for humankind. And I hope that I'm resonating with some of you folks out there, and Keegan, if you're understanding what I'm saying. But it should be effortless if what you're doing is true, and therefore does not necessarily need to be proven or need an explanation or even need much action steps because it is so in line with the way things are, right? You're one with it. There's no separation from it. People talk about this idea of duality and non-duality. It's about transcending perhaps both. How is that possible, right? It's like, well, then isn't that non-duality? It's like, okay. See, this is metaphysics. This is what I talk about in the Book of Opposites. And I say that's the highest level of looking at opposites, is seeing this non-duality and duality type of idea, the unity and division being inseparable.
That's beautiful. And I love this concept about prayer as action, as being in the flow with it. I came up with an acronym for prayer, which I like to use, which is practice rigorously attuning yourself.
Mm,
And I can mess up saying it. Or my first permaculture book, I
I
call it a
like that.
permaculture book, was The One Straw Revolution by Masanobu Fukuoka. And
Yes.
he actually created this methodology of agriculture, which he called do nothing farming,
Exactly.
because he's embodying this unity and letting nature
Yep.
kind of do the work and just
That's in the
and
book.
he messed up the first, when he started out, he messed up, he made mistakes and there were losses, and
Hmm.
that's the learning journey. There's no
Yep.
failure.
Exactly.
There's just lessons, and we have this amazing ability, even if you're somebody that's living in a high rise somewhere and you have no connection with nature in your daily reality, you can still see other people online engaging with nature and have this amazing. We have mirror neurons, right? We
Mm.
can learn by and experience and feel what other people are doing by watching them do it. And so
Yep.
at any time, one of the things that Masanobu Fukuoka writes in that book is that 100% of the people should be farmers. And the other thing he says is the ultimate goal of agriculture is not to produce good food, it's to produce good people.
Mm.
It's really this integrative philosophy of a way
Yes.
of living with our mother, sustaining us, Mother Earth, feeding us daily, and us reciprocating and completing the cycle and organizing. That's the thing I want to say. There's another acronym for God, which is good, orderly direction. And so
Mm.
if we're moving in alignment with that, that movement and that rest and that do nothing part of the do nothing farming, obviously you don't do nothing, but
Right.
you do less than the chemical agriculture is doing, which is
Yes.
self-harm, and thinking in quarterly profit and not considering, the years to
Hmm.
come, the generations to come. Uh, so yeah,
Yeah.
just take a breath, start anywhere, start again and again and again, and you become liberated.
Hmm. It's this confusion, which again is just like these so-called problems or things that we have to get over that actually makes us very strong and grounded. Ironically enough, when we confront that, we go right into it. We say, yeah, wait, it's okay, I'm confused. It's okay, I'm feeling this way. It's okay. There's no bad feelings per se. Like Alan Watts talks about how there might be good and bad actions, but when it comes to feelings, like you're feeling a certain way for a reason, right? Doesn't mean you should go act on those feelings, but listen to those feelings. Why are they there? Because there's a lesson to be learned from it. Just like I said, there's a lesson to be learned from everything. And when you said food, yeah, what if our real food is not actually the physical food? What if it's actually the thoughts that go into the food? What if it's the community that's created from that food? What if it's you interacting with that plant? Like that can be a more powerful food than the food that you call food, right? And that can be a source of energy. That can be something that feeds your life. People say this feeds my soul. Well, again, soul is a spiritual concept. They use this as a term to say they're becoming more fulfilled for the reason that they're feeding something that isn't normally fed through physical means. Well, how is that possible, right? So there's no coincidence. What we touched on morality, we touched on purpose, we touched on uh, spirituality, and we're touching on the non-material. Like these things all relate, and they're usually all grouped in together. And then we package it together, and we say, "Oh, there's a religion," right? Or this is again all pseudoscientific or nonsense. So seeing how these elements can actually relate to one another and where they stem from, and why people follow that is profound because we often find that even if we are following science, there's another purpose. We still have morality to relate to one another. We still are looking up to something, whether it's the science or the numbers, or, we're still worshiping something in a sense. And we're still hoping for certain results, whether it's a thesis or a certain hypothesis of how things are. And then we still have to be grounded in something. So, it's all the same precepts being done here, science and religion actually having perhaps more in common than they think. Um,
Absolutely.
yeah.
And I've been speaking to, there's another speaker, she's mentioning indigenous science. And you don't
Mm,
hear that too often, but indigenous lifestyles and ways. And interestingly, putting together the message for the website of this summit, I was looking through some quotes from Native Americans, and a lot of them talk about religion as a way of life. And I've heard you mention a couple times in this conversation about how we are bound. We are bound up with our relationships with one another. And I learned in permaculture that's called the invisible structures, right? These
mm,
things like natural law, the relationship dynamics that we have, and contracts. And it's no accident that tract of land and a contract. And if you look up that word tract, it actually also means a religious. Sometimes it's a something they would sing, like instead of saying the Alleluias at the end of a prayer, that, or even the Hallelujahs, that might be considered a tract, or a tract could be a treatise, right?
mm,
Usually, or like a religious writing. And so
mm.
this is law, and it shows the connection between the land and the law that we
Sure.
have, and it's all about our living, evolving relationship. And there's desires, like I call it wish listening. Like when I go to a land and I just tune in and I see, like, what does the earth want to be here?
Hmm.
This is the dynamic, co-participate participatory way of doing permaculture design, right?
Yes.
instead of just saying like, oh, this is what the people want, and this is what we're going to build, and
Hmm.
we might say a prayer to the trees we're going to cut down to build the house, but we would do it anyway. That's
Hmm.
not the way forward. I think the way forward is by consent, by having a communion and communication, and forming these agreements with the land, and
Mm.
and that way we can live in harmony with all life. And
Yes.
um, Cory, I also want to ask you, about your news that you share, because
Hmm.
it's also nourishing, right? This conversation is another form of nourishment when we're able to uh, delve into some information that feeds in and gets our intellect enlivened, right?
Hmm.
So, and you are a prolific source of that form of nourishment. So I'd love to hear some more.
As we all.
The news, the Liberator too, that you've been, this project you've had for years now. Can you tell us about it?
Yes, so the Liberator 2 is named after the Liberator newspaper, originally from the 1800s. William Lloyd Garrison was the founder of that newspaper, where he was printing editions every single week, and thousands of editions, thousands of newspapers dedicated to ending chattel slavery in the 1800s. And from those efforts, it sparked a whole nationwide debate on, is chattel slavery moral or not? Is this something that we should exist with? And, after thousands of years and after tons of justification of people saying this is necessary for the economy, this is necessary, like we've always been doing this is the way society is, it's natural, it's necessary. Just constantly hearing this over and over, like we hear repetitive messages nowadays from the media on all sorts of different topics. It's the same thing back then. There was censorship then, just as there is now. There's the same dynamics at play, people making justifications for things that currently exist that they assume is just natural and part of reality when they may not be. And so, I challenge political slavery or governments in their existence. And the abolitionists also did that, because they saw that the government of God was essentially above that of man. And that's the reason why the slave deserves to be freed, because he's not beholden to man, he's beholden to something higher. So the abolitionists tend to be more religious inspired, but there were also a lot of abolitionists who were not part of the religions because the churches were pro-slavery. Everybody was pro-slavery. They had to create their own parallel system. Well, that's what we're doing now as well. They created the Underground Railroad. They had to build towns. They had to grow food. We're literally doing the same thing right now. And we're sharing a moral message that's meant to open up consciousness. And we're doing so with peace, with love, with nonviolence. A lot of those abolitionists, they were pacifists, basically. They called themselves non-resistants. Now, if we're a historian, we can call them pacifists. But they were just peaceful people who didn't want to be associated with violence because they knew some slaves would rebel. They knew that the media would blame them for different events that happened. And that's what happened. Like the media would attack these abolitionists, call them crazy and violent. Meanwhile, they're like some of the most peaceful, spiritual, moral people that you can find perhaps in that day and age. I mean, look at Leo Tolstoy, who wrote a book after the abolitionist time period, who actually corresponded with some of them. And, he is known as a Christian, non-resistant. He wrote a book called The Kingdom of God is Within You. And, he's known as one of the greatest authors of all time. And he wrote a book as well called Slavery of Our Times, which is very similar to my book, Slavery Gone for Good. I have many quotes from him in this book and many others from abolitionists in the 1800s and some folks after their time. So it's a profound thing. And in studying that history and the psychology behind it, that's what inspired me to create the newspaper, to continue William Lloyd Garrison's efforts and to free all of humanity for the abolitionism that they ultimately set up to create. It wasn't just to free ourselves from physical chains. It was to free ourselves from mental chains, to free ourselves from all the systems that control us away from truth, God, nature, or whatever you want to call it, right? Because they were all united. They could disagree with each other, the abolitionists, just as we do. We all disagree with each other. That's fine. We can accept that. But as long as we all understand that none of us deserve to be enslaved, that nobody deserves to be coerced against their will, then, we have something really powerful to ground our action on. And it's something so simple, so radically simple. Why aren't we embracing it? And again, it's because there's these layers of societal programming and things we need to get over that actually is more of the focus than having to teach anything new. Right? So I can talk about naturosophy and opposites and all these different perspectives, but I'm not trying to teach you something. If anything, I'm trying to help you learn more about yourself. And I told you not to rely on me. It's all about perhaps seeing different perspectives so that way you can get out of the current ones that you're in for yourself. And just as you mentioned, right? Like, do you have some new ideology to share with the world? I don't know. We've had a lot of ideologies in this world. Maybe we don't need another one, right? Maybe we don't need to go on another crusade and say that we are the only person who's got it all figured out and everybody else is wrong. Maybe, maybe just maybe, we can look at the world differently. And when you said, you know, people talking about sound and the stuff regarding plants, I mean, how many people will I meet who say they actually have seen or experienced Bigfoot? How many people have I met in gardening and permaculture who have listened to their plants or talked to their plants and actually found out it works for growing food and helps them understand when things are going to happen, right? All of these things would not be considered scientific or, legitimate in the mainstream perspective, but does that make it illegitimate? Does that make it untrue? And when it comes to diet, oh my gosh, so conflicting, so much controversy. What diet do I follow? Can we transcend that just as much as all these other boxes we get ourselves in? It's the same exact thing. Can we see that we have to listen to our body and listen to what's going on and observe these different foods and realize they all have unique effects? And that every medicine in nature, like there's tons of plants with hundreds of compounds, and we can take one compound and turn that into a drug, and we can create endless drugs. But what if we just see like there's just an endless world of possibility that is right before us? And just because it's possibility does not make it not true. And that's the thing that if you are an atheist or you call yourself religious, is something that you have to ask yourself, do you have it all figured out? Do you really know everything? And if you don't, then what's going on here? Why do we use this title, right? And perhaps by understanding this relationship that we have with ourselves, by using this title, we can then open up to those people who totally disagree with us. And that's how we have to move this future world, is seeing like William Lloyd Garrison, these guys, they had crazy discourses. They had crazy letters they were sending back and forth to people. They were having all sorts of talks. Like these are the things I have to do setting up my own freedom events. And you're going to meet people from all sorts of walks of life, especially if you want to set up local projects. You have to accept that. You have to welcome that, welcome different perspectives. Otherwise, you're never going to work with everybody. You're never going to create the world that you envision. And it's going to turn out totally different from the way that you envisioned it originally. Like plans never go as expected. Because again, when you're flowing and when you're listening, that's how things go, you know? It's a very
Oh,
amazing thing.
I love what you said about the speaking with plants. And I want to share about last summer. I was living in Damanhur, which is a spiritual community, 50 years old in the northern part of Italy. And I had an opportunity to go there 12 years ago. And people told me, friends of mine in Italy, they said, don't go there. That place is a cult, right? You're gonna be inducted into their mystery cult religion, and they just want your money and all this stuff. And you know these are like uh, programs that we have that's like, oh, don't go explore that, it's too dangerous, don't connect with nature. This is the message that we get when we're watching television from the pharmaceutical companies that control the media, right? Nature is dangerous, but you can trust the guys in the white coats, right? And we get that message all over and over again. And the the programming and the norms are, one of the messages that I like, the central um, thing that I really learned when I was in Dalmanhur over the summer is that freedom is actually the product of our discipline, right? We have to be able to choose the things which are going to allow us to bloom and grow, and be able to say no to all these things which are limiting. and to be able to discern between those. And there's a great example. This movie I found out about this. It's called The Free State of Jones, and it's about a historical protester, somebody that refused to fight in the South. I think it was during the Civil War, right? I didn't watch the movie because I heard it. I was, oh, that's interesting. Somebody wants to be free and on the land, but the
Mm-hmm.
way they show it, like it's just violent. And I watched the
Mm-hmm.
first few minutes of the movie. I'm like, I don't need to see this. Like I'm developing the discipline to not consume this violence because that's not how I want my world to be, you
Yeah.
know. And so I don't promote it and I don't perpetuate it and I don't consume it. Um,
Mm.
and and it's just recognizing those things. It's like the norms and the culture, right? A cult is just short for culture. This is like I was getting at earlier, like the Native Americans talking about their religion as a way of life and being bound with the land and with one another.
Mm.
It's the norms that we're forming, the habits that we're forming. This is what is really the law and application. And
Yes.
if we want to create justice, we have to perpetuate righteousness, right? Uh,
Mm.
that's the state motto of Hawaii. It's a translation is the goodness of the land is perpetuated by the righteousness of the people that live there. Uh,
Mm. Yeah, wow, amazing. See, I mean, how much wisdom has been of the past that, we're just returning to now, right? And or even of the future that we're merely just tapping into because we're looking at this ever present. It's an amazing thing, and I encourage everybody does this because again, they can do it, and they don't need a book to do it. They don't need any particular material to do it. Because again, you share the same reality as all the philosophers throughout history, all those same people that you respect and see full of wisdom. You live in the same reality as them. So I would say believe in yourself, the possibility of embracing or seeing the same things that they have. And if you deny yourself from the very possibility to explore and express as such, then how are you going to conceive of further possibilities down the line, right? So yeah, I absolutely see what you're getting at there. And again, there's the another irony there with freedom and control, right? It's like I control myself, but now that makes me free. It's like, okay, so control and freedom actually go hand in hand. What's going on here, right? But usually we differentiate, say, well, control is the opposite of freedom. Well, not necessarily. Where are you placing the control,
and
right?
it's
Where is
where is
the
it
freedom?
coming from, right?
Right.
Like it's like if I'm not governing myself, somebody will.
hmm So it's all discernment because, it's so much easier to package everything and say this is what it is because it doesn't allow our brains to discipline on what we think we know. And so, again, it's a position of humility. It's from a beginner's mind. And if a practitioner doesn't have that when they're talking to a new client, then they're never going to understand their client. They're never going to really be able to help them. The ones that help their client the most are the ones that really listen in and start from a blank slate. Like, okay, what is it that you have, right? Without judging, without having expectations. And the person probably wants an open space like that because they don't want to be judged. They don't want to be have all these expectations pushed upon them. Like, leave me alone, right? I just want to heal. I don't want to like be brought into something that, you have an agenda for. People, this is why people are getting sick of politics and all these systems, is because again, they're training people into worldviews that people are beyond by their mere nature. You aren't an ideology. You aren't a politician or a businessman. Like you are just you. We form these identities, and then over time we realize it's hurting us, and we're getting all these diseases, and then we wonder why. It's because it's not reality. It really is just that simple, right? So when I say nature is the answer, it's the one thing I'm grounded on. Of all the things that I talk about, the one thing I'm grounded on most is that I understand the world that is ever present beyond me, that is all around me, that is here beyond all the perceptions. And so that allows me to say, okay, there's something to love, to respect, and to say is good. Right? People say you can't say what is natural is what is good. That's the naturalistic fallacy. And now they're labeling all these different things. And in philosophy, this is you can't do that. But Stoicism does, and people are finding great benefit in that. Taoism does. People are finding amazing benefit in that. And when the people study it, I don't see anybody who disagrees with it. I really don't find any Christians or atheists who say, "Oh, Taoism, that's the problem. It's dogmatic and it's controlling people." It's like, no, they really can't argue with it because it's looking at the yin and the yang. It's looking at all the opposing worldviews. It's open-minded. It's full of humility. So it's like this is why it's a beautiful thing that I study worldviews like Taoism because um, I still haven't met somebody who's like, yeah, this is wrong. I only see people who say that if you say that in comparison to Christianity or some worldview that someone identifies with. But otherwise, if you just say it's a philosophy and you say it's something that is, sharing different wisdom and you share that wisdom with them, they'll probably relate it to their Christianity and to their Bible because there is an intersection between these worldviews. Just because you live in Thailand or some other country that doesn't even know what Jesus or Christ or the Bible is, doesn't mean that they have no relationship with this thing called Christ or Jesus or the Bible, right? I mean, there's so many ideas like the Jesus Sutras, where like Jesus would travel to India or study from different Eastern worldviews, or there would be a like different influencers upon Jesus if he was a man that walked the land, or if he was somebody who was divinely inspired. And there's like this internal Christ consciousness people talk about, and there's like the idea that Christ is like Leo Tolstoy said, within you, and not so much something that is like an external thing, or the Quakers, the inner light. If you don't see these different worldviews, and I ask the average Christian, it's like, I don't know, I've never read or seen anything from them. It's like, okay, then why are you so quick to judge? Like, why are you so quick to judge? And it's like, okay, well then if you like the way you have these things and the way you perceive the world, okay. That's not a problem. But the minute you start attacking other people for what they believe and in the way that they perceive the world, whoa, 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 you got to be careful because I'm open to you, but are you open to me? How are we supposed to have a relationship if only one person is open and giving and the other person is just, taking, and they're not really giving anything back? There has to be a reciprocity. And I thought, it says in the Bible, turn the other cheek, we don't serve two masters, the golden rule. But yet, how many Christians obey the government more than their own God that they worship because ultimately they're never going to disobey the government. They're not strong enough to do so. They believe it's like that has to be obeyed no matter what, and it's natural and part of reality. It's like, and then they'll use the quote, "Give unto Caesar what is Caesar's, give unto Jesus what is Jesus." That doesn't mean that you give your taxes to Caesar. If you read that scripture, there's different ways to interpret that. Like there's another way of interpreting it where it says, okay, if you're giving to man, you're giving to man, but if you're giving to God, you're giving to God. Like you really show your allegiance.
And Jesus said, "Let the dead tend to the dead." And that corporate world is all about fiction, right? The legal system is all about just what's written down on paper. And if
Yeah.
you believe you're existing within it, you actually are placing yourself in that fictional realm.
Mm,
And so it's a cult of death.
yeah. And I question a lot of things, right? And I hope that the viewer right now questions me. I'm sure they are, because the amount of things I've touched on and different ways I've gone about it is going to create question. That's a great thing, though, because if I were to just tell you everything that you just like to hear, then I would not be disciplining your very mind right now. So I'm doing the very thing that I actually want to do, which is what I do with myself, which is introduce new worldviews, right? That's what I've been talking about.
I appreciate your introduction of the worldviews, and I would like people to explore what you have to offer. As we kind of wind down the conversation, do you have any you know things you'd like to let people know about coming up, and how can they explore more of your philosophy and prolific work that you're doing?
Well, thanks, man. I want them to follow you too because you're doing great work, and I want to all support each other. So anybody is welcome to reach out to me if you're doing any great projects out there, and whatever you're working on, just feel free to send me updates. I love to connect with everybody, no matter where they are at. And I'm working always on different projects. Right now, a movie script with Jim Gale, right, from Food Forest Abundance, where we're trying to create something that shows the influencers what it looks like. We're not just talking about it, but showing the visuals behind it. And then, like, this is how we go from this point in time to the future. And these are timeless works. These are works that you can explore anytime. So whether you're watching this now or in the future, it doesn't matter. What we're talking about is something so profound, which is why I teach it, and why I think it gives me great purpose. And I think many people are watching this is because it gives them great purpose. They're seeing something that is beyond themselves, that is so touching for so many people, so healing. So that's why I do this work, and I love connecting with people in person too. So anybody's welcome to come to Florida, Central West Coast, and we're setting up a whole community center where you can probably stay. Depending on when you're watching this, you might be able to, because we're building all sorts of things. But it's very exciting, and I'll always provide more updates. So theliberator.us is the website, as you mentioned, but all my channels is Cory Nature is the Answer. So you can find me on all sorts of different platforms. I even am on TikTok now, experimenting there a little bit with my name, Cory Edmund. That would be my name over there. But always stay true to yourself and think for yourself. And if I left you confused, good. I know Osho would always say, uh, my whole work is to confuse you. That was literally like one of his entire speeches was like, I am here to confuse you. But because he understood this discipline of the mind as well. And anybody who looks at that from an open-minded worldview would be like, okay, I understand what he's talking about. And it actually grounds me so much to see this confusion, right? Just as it is to see the shadow work that Carl Jung talks about, to see the things we don't want to look at, to see that which we have to look at that keeps becoming apparent to us. It's like, yeah, religion and politics, we're not supposed to talk about that. That's too controversial. It's like I talk about it on my channel all the time. I'm willing to confront it. And because of that, I meet the most beautiful people. And I also meet a lot of people from so many different worldviews. People like, whoa, Cory, how did you meet this person? How did you meet that person? It's like because I invited it to my life. And then from there, I have had so many different foods I've tried, so many different thoughts that I've never considered before, all because I conceived the possibility. That's what happens when one goes down a truth path. One truth, next truth. Oh my gosh, now I'm down a rabbit hole. And now I transformed my whole life. That's what happened. So it happened to me, it'll happen to more people as time goes on. Thank you very much for having me on. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Cory. It's been a real pleasure, and thank you everyone for sticking with us through this confirmation, this conversation, and this exciting exploration. Lots of love to you all. See you soon again.